And Penny and I are really excited to welcome you all to Barichara Updates. I believe this is number 17, if I remember correctly. And so we're like rolling in this after several months. And what I want to do today is give you some of the delicate feeling with rich real-world stories about trauma healing, decolonization of land, what's actually happening on the ground, and do it in a way that says there's a part of our work that is on the ground, like work we're doing in the bioparque, and we're not getting to do that as much as we want to these days because we're activating so many online networks and helping to create capacities for collaboration. But at the same time, there are there are three really important processes unfolding in Barichara right now that we want to share with you. And I want to share all three of them with different examples. And so the three things that are happening here that we want to talk about today, one of them is the trials and tribulations of trying to purchase a piece of land in Colombia as we're attempting to complete the purchase of Las Albercas. And we want to share with you more of just how broken our trauma-filled cultures and broken nation states are, with some stories about what's happening with Las Albercas. And then we want to talk about some profound healing that is occurring within the work of the Territorial Foundation. And I will not mention names for some of the parts of the story because I'll be talking about things that are personal, but that are personal involving other people. But I want to give you an understanding of how important some of these very subtle cultural patterns are related to trauma and trauma healing. And then we want to talk with you about how we're beginning to create meaningful collaboration between digital nomads and locals, and how we're building a bridge between outsiders and locals that feels like it has real potential to be brought to other bioregions, to be a model for how bioregional learning centers can work. We just talked with Trisha and Iris about some of these insights for Osa Peninsula, and we can already see how we could transfer some of what we're doing here to other landscapes. And so we want to talk about these three realms to just give you a sense of it's like the cultural underbelly of bioregional regeneration, the part that doesn't normally get talked about, that we don't have pictures of, that, we couldn't even take pictures of these things, like to tell you about talking with lawyers, to try and create contracts, to help break the law in a particular way while doing money laundering, to help local mafias allow us to give them money. And it's like, we don't take pictures of that stuff. But you need to know about it, because you need to know how real regenerative work happens. And so, so this is what I want to do, is just tell some stories, and I will invite Penny to tell stories, to add to the stories anytime she'd like. And then we can have discussion around them. And I just want to name one other thing before going to Barichara, which is that Penny and I are going to Boulder, Colorado, leaving on November 4th. Penny's going to be there for a month. I'm going to be there for about a week and a half. And we're already beginning to catalyze possibilities for activating the bioregion of the Boulder-Denver area in interesting ways. So what we're talking about in this way of connecting between bioregions, we're already actively, just this week, we're in dialogue with Osa Peninsula in Costa Rica and with Colorado. And so less than 2 weeks after Refi Barichara ended, we're already patterning in our own behavior some of these really deep changes that will continue to happen. And so I want to begin by telling you about what's happening with Las Albercas. Because you all know Las Albercas is this like Tom Clancy novel type of story. Like it deserves to have some movie with Tom Cruise in it. Or, no, not Tom Cruise, but like some kind of action drama that I really count, because it's such an incredible story of how difficult it is to decolonize land. And the most important thing to update you on is that Dan was able to sell his house in California. The money is available. We can complete the purchase of Las Albercas. We had taken out a loan from other members of the Barichara pledge community. That money has been paid back. And so we're in this like beautiful place where you could say, oh, you've got the money, just send it to them and it's done. But oh no, that's not how it works in Latin America. Because the people we're buying the land from insist that we lie about the price of the land so they can avoid paying taxes. They're adamant about this. And actually, it's a common practice in Colombia that when people buy and sell land, especially in the rural areas, that they agree to put a lower price on the deed so that everyone avoids paying taxes. And you know, I was always a pro-tax, progressive, politically progressive person in the United States, where we actually had some viable public infrastructure and the funding actually helped create things. But in places like Colombia, paying money to the nation state also includes paying government-sponsored death squads to kill indigenous leaders so Monsanto or mining companies can have access to their resources. And so it's understandable why people avoid paying their taxes here. It's a really complex and delicate topic. And so I'm not going to be pro-tax or anti-tax. I'm just going to say from a very practical point of view, the people we're buying the land from really insist that we lie about the price of the land on the escritura, which is the land deed, and that this is a common practice in Colombia. And it's only been illegal since 2018. But even though it's technically illegal, it's still a common practice. And there are lots of ways that the law is flexible to allow this thing to happen. And so we're in a situation that is incredibly complex because of historical traumas and colonialism and a history of violence and all these various ways that people manage land culturally in this landscape, where it's actually not even appropriate for us to demand that we write the official price on the escritura. We would actually be breaking social norms to do that, even though that's what the law says. So it's just really complex. And so what's happening is this, that any money that enters Colombia through a bank has all kinds of money laundering laws because of the narco trafficking history and the other things that happen in Colombia. So once money enters into a bank account, someone is being registered with the central bank for that money to be tracked, and they have to justify where it goes. So if we're going to bring in a large amount of money, about $250,000, and then on the deed declare that we only paid 10% of it, then the other 90% we have to somehow justify where it went. And so the problem we have is that the sellers of the land are requiring us to give them the money under the table, but we don't have a way to bring briefcases of cash and Colombian pesos into Colombia without it entering into bank accounts. And if it enters into a bank account, guess who gets stuck with justifying to the central bank that they're not doing something illegal? This gringo. And so we're trying to find creative ways to bend the law and not really break it, to coerce or force these local mafia guys that we're buying the land from to agree to a higher public price that we put on the deed, and finding ways to use cryptocurrency to try to launder money into the country so we can pay it to them under the table without me personally being responsible for it. While working with lawyers, while being pressured by the sellers to give them money. I mean, this is what we have the money and we're just trying to pay them. And this is where we are. And so I wanted you just to understand how fucking complex this is, how messy this is. This is, we've been with Las Albercas for 2 years, and we're at the point where everything looks like we've got the compraventa, we've got the extension of the compraventa, the money's ready to pay them, and here we are. This is just the next spiritual trial of decolonization of land, where the decolonization is mostly with not the white guy from the north, but with everything in the context. And I just want to show you how ironic that is. That the color of my skin or the fact that I'm of European ancestry is completely irrelevant to where the colonization is in this process, which just shows you again how messy the real world is. And so I wanted to tell you that story so you could start to feel into what I have to hold as the person who's trying to bring the money. And I'll let Dan tell whatever stories he wants to tell about how hard it's been for him to make this money available to donate it. I mean, his own journey is incredible. And we're in this moment. Right now, we're in this moment, trying to figure out how to give them the last of the money. Every step along the way has been messy and unexpected in this way. And so I just wanted you to feel it. I wanted you to feel that because if someone just says, well, the people from the North have all the power and they bring the money, that completely mischaracterizes what's happening here. And I'm not even saying I'm righteous. Like, I'm not going to pretend that there's any ethical clarity in this situation. There's no pretense of ethical clarity in this situation. The honest reality is this is a complex clusterfuck of a mess. And it has been from day one, and I don't think it's going to end anytime soon. And so this is just like, how do we do real world regenerative work? If I didn't tell you this true story of what's happening, you couldn't appreciate what Las Albercas really means. And so that's one story I want to tell you. Luckily, Natalia, our amazing Natalia, her childhood friend, Luis Fernando, went on to become an amazing commercial lawyer for helping with international business in Colombia. And he has offered to guide us through trying to renegotiate the contracts while we're walking with our dear friend Juan Pablo, who is at Refi Barichara, who is working with a crypto financial exchange company in Colombia that could help us launder the money, but do it legally so that the money could arrive in cash to the local people without me being personally responsible for it. Notice we have to create a tax haven to protect me, to enable me to give money to a local mafia so that we can decolonize and liberate land for regeneration. Welcome to Reality 101. I never in my life would have thought that I'd be in this situation. And so that's just how it is. This is just how it really is. And so that was the first story I wanted to tell. I'd love to just offer a moment to sit with the complexity of this and to ask if maybe there are one or two comments. We can have full discussion later, but I want to go to the next story, but just like to invite if there's a question or a comment before I do. And welcome, Stan, lovely to see you. Okay, then Midi, please.
Well, I don't have any solutions, obviously, but I do say my guiding light is what is the most regenerative solution that kind of should be guiding me if in a similar situation. I've been in kind of gunfight at OK Corral situations quite often in other circumstances, especially actually with chief executives of oil companies. And what I've found is that sometimes if you say boo, if you're willing to mean it, people collapse. So the first question that came up for me was, I wonder if those guys would really walk away if they know that the money is available and can be paid now. Are they really going to walk away from the deal? You know, and I have no answer, but that was the first question that came up in me. And the next question that comes up is, what would be the cost of them walking away to the bioregion of Barichara? What really would be the cost? It's these level of questions that my natural instinct goes to. Thank you. And I understand, you know, I've bought property sous table, it was called in French Corsican law. So I know exactly the dynamic. And at that time, I was just wanting the property. I was willing to do whatever the local said was the way that worked best for them.
Yeah, I think I'll just briefly share what we're going to do so that the story doesn't leave you on quite the cliffhanger, although the cliffhanger is still real, which is that when we talked to the lawyer yesterday, Natalia's childhood friend, he was wonderful. And I can now hold advanced technical legal conversations in Spanish. Go me. My Spanish is progressing. Penny was looking, going like, wow, I was exhausted afterwards. I would have been exhausted in English after that conversation. But what we're going to do is try to force them to agree to having two contracts, a private contract with the real price and a contract with the price we're going to put on the document, and in a couple of other clarifying steps legally. And this afternoon, we're talking with Juan Pablo's team about what kinds of contracts they need to have to convert US dollars into cryptocurrency, into pesos, and have it arise as cash. So that those, because there are still contracts that have to be created with the local people. And we don't quite know if that actually gets around the problem or not. And so we'll know that this afternoon. But I just wanted you to know that this is very much in process. And it is as complex and messy as it sounds. And so with everything else I've been doing, I've been holding Las Albercas in this way. So that was my first story I wanted to share. Stan, you're going to really want to go back and listen to the recording of this part. You're going to love it. Well, love it's the wrong word. You're going to reflect deeply on it. So the second story I want to tell is a much more positive story. And this is the one where I'm going to conceal names because it's about a specific person in the community that I haven't really talked about, that isn't well known outside, but it's a person who was very, very important in all of this work. This was a person who was helpful in the initial conversations about negotiating the purchase of Ori Hindalagua. This is a person who is a Colombian that is a community leader and a social entrepreneur and a very powerful and amazing human being. But like so many Colombians, is deeply, deeply traumatized by their childhood growing up in the violence. And this is a person who's a parent of a child a little bit older than Elise. And so we initially knew each other. So we initially knew each other because this person's partner had worked with Felipe through a group called Efecto Mariposa, which works with Schumacher College and the Presencing Institute to bring facilitation techniques for emergence into Colombia. And so this person's partner does that work, and this person does their own community development work with community organizations, trained as a lawyer, and really specializes in collaborative finance and governance models. Someone who's really good at that part. And so this is a very, very important person in our community, and who was really like essential for some of the early work in creating the Territorial Foundation. So someone who was helpful in part of the time when we had the advisory council for the Barichara Fund. And but they didn't represent one of the projects. They arrived later into that process as it became the conversation about the Territorial Foundation. And this is a person who went from being right in the heart of the community process to abandoning the community process completely because they were emotionally triggered by their trauma. The first time this happened was early last year, where they were like there was a core team of us moving everything forward, and they just disappeared. Like, I'm out, and they were gone for like 6 or 8 months from the community process. And then they came back in and got right back in the heart of it, and were helping lead and drive the work. And then were triggered again, and they were out. And since February of this year, they've been out of the process entirely. And in the last week, they came back. And so I just want to give that much context to say, talking about a beautiful, incredible human being who's got some really profound challenges because of the history of violence in this country, and that has returned in a way that tells us what a bioregional weaver really is. So Benji, are you listening? Because this person left both times because they, and by the way, I sat down with this person in the sanctuary, in the food forest of the bioparque last week. It was their first time they'd set foot in the food forest where the syntropic agriculture system is. So in the last year and a half, I've been doing that work. They had never visited it. Their child had visited it and come and played with Margarita's son, but they had never visited this person. And when they came, we sat together and I was told this story of how this is a person who part of their trauma is that their mind needs to analyze and judge and find out how they're smarter. They're always arguing and outwitting the other people in their own mind. They're always looking for the moment to abandon the other person as unworthy and less than them. And that this has been a struggle all their life. This is probably why this person became a lawyer. You know, that they went through this process and they're really good at it. And they were good at defeating the opponents in their mind while destroying friendships and not being in community for very good reasons. It's also as a person who said that with tears streaming down their face, they said that when they arrived in Barichara, it was the first time in their life that they felt like they could let their child walk out of their house and walk next door without watching to see if their child was killed, because of the level of violence they experienced when they were younger. And so to come to Barichara and feel the peace of this place began a healing process. And so this person said to me that they had problems with the way that I do things, so they left. They had problems with the way that Natalia does things, so they left. And what came back to this person and why they're returning now, by the way, Refi Barichara created the context for this to occur. The ripples of change that are happening in the community caused this healing to occur. Because this person met with Natalia and healed the relationship, and then met with me to heal the relationship, and then said they're ready to come back in and help create the territorial foundation. And what they said was this. They said, I can no longer let my own trauma tell me that if I don't like someone, I can just walk away from working with them. Because I have a responsibility living in this territory to do what the territory needs, whether I like the other person or not. Now, all of us have experienced walking away, undermining or destroying relationships because we didn't like someone, because we didn't agree with them. So what this person is doing is embodying an absolutely transformational healing process. And they exemplify what it means for the territory to weave us, even when our egos are bruised. This is a true bioregional weaver. Because of the way that they're letting the bioregion do the weaving. So you got that, Benji? I guess it's a big deal. This is a really big deal. And so I wanted to tell this story to show you the depth of what happened when those medicine women held the fire at Refi Barichara. The depth of what happened as the ripples started to flow into the community of the way the locals were holding an integration with outsiders. And the depth of what's happening in each of us as we become servants to our own territories. And so for me, this story is profoundly inspiring, but in a somber way. It's like I need to quietly take a walk by myself to be inspired by it. But I find it deeply inspiring. So I sat with this person and we had a deeply healing conversation last week. And what I said to them, I looked into their eyes and I watched their eyes tears up as I said it. As I said, when you left in February, all I could do was hold love for you in my heart and wait for you to return when you were ready. And there were times in April, May, June, and July when I said to Natalia, I'm waiting for this person to return, they'll be back. And when they come back, I will embrace them with love. And I got to say this to this person's face and watch their heart heal. And so And this was when we started talking about when I need to travel, I want my child to stay with you. If you need to go for an emergency, your child can stay with me. We are a community, we will care for each other. Like we were talking at that depth. Now, I grew up in Missouri in like meth / racism, sexism / domestic violence country. I've never had community like this. So I just want to tell that story to show you a little bit more of what's happening in the regeneration of Barichara. So I'd love to just give a moment. I don't know if there's anything you want to share related to this, or if anyone else would like to share.
I'll just share a little piece related to this that had come to me just watching some of the dynamics with trauma and what does it take to be a cooperator? Like, and that's what it takes. It takes being able to have the capacity to be with your own triggers and stay in the process. Stay in the process, keep coming back, and moving toward that North Star, even if you don't like the person you're working with. You know, and that actually, there's a lot behind that. What that takes to be able to do that, that's a big deal. It takes a lot of healing. So just add that.
Yeah. Thank you. Gail, please.
Yeah, and I add not only coming back if you don't like the person, but also coming back if you don't like what you have to do. And that other story you described and what I'm going through today, they're both examples of that. You know, got to do what you got to do to get to where you got to go. And my doorbell just rang, so I gotta go get the door.
Thank you for that, Gail. It's so important. I'm guessing all of you, having heard the story of Las Albercas, is like, do you think I wanted to do this? This is one of the deepest spiritual trainings of my life, is purchasing Las Albercas. And it's been going for more than 2 years. It started in August of 2020. It's been incredible what the land is teaching me. Like, I do not, at 0 steps of the way, do I get to decide if Las Albercas is liberated. There is no illusion of white savior here. I have no say in it. I just have to surrender, and not like I'm the white savior anyway, but like, I have to surrender at every step to the process. I have to compromise some of my own personal ethics, like all kinds of things I'm doing to make this happen. Just to show you, like, this is really a big deal. This kind of work is really a big deal. I think we're going from like we're going from the most painful to the deepest to one that's lighter. So the third story I want to tell. Well, first, are there any other comments or questions that someone would like to share before I go to the third story?
Just the comment that it can actually be really important to leave if it gets overwhelming, that can be seen as part of the necessary taking care of oneself. And I think the work of Thomas Hubel and the collective trauma work has really revealed that trauma is a way of the body taking care of itself. And it's a beautiful story, Joe. Thank you so much.
Just to like stamp that with approval. That's what I did with this person when they left. Because I've fallen in love with this person. I mean, such a beautiful heart, such a beautiful mind, such a beautiful being. Like I had nothing but love for them taking space for themselves. I had no judgment at all. The first time last year I had judgment, but I had done some of my own healing and the separation from Jessica, cleansing some of my childhood traumas, that when this happened again the next year, I was ready to hold the field in my own way. And so just really honoring what you've said. So the third story is about our friends. Well, Jill here would be a secondary example of it, not because I'm not going to tell her story. I'm going to tell the story of what Sev and Sam are doing, but it relates to some of the stuff that Jill is doing. So Jill could pipe in at any time she likes on this as I tell this story to add to what we're trying to create here, is that during Refi Barichara, we created a context where outsiders could meaningfully contribute to local projects. And we're trying to understand how to do that, which is an ongoing learning process. Yesterday, Penny and I had lunch with our dear friends, Sev and Sam, this couple that came here from Madison, Wisconsin. And briefly about Sev and Sam, They work on things related to how do you measure ecological value? How do you represent it in some way that an economy could make use of it? And then how do you track how it relates to the flows and exchanges within a local economy or with investment from the outside? And this relates to things like, how do you document and verify that something of value happened? A tree was planted. How do you document that? How do you show that carbon was sequestered? They're interested in questions that are related to this sort of technical, empirical verification and data handling. But then like Sam is more the artist and the visualizer. How do you visualize it, make it understandable? And so they do that kind of work. They have an organization called Ecolab that they're a part of. They work with Regen Network and groups like them, and everyone who knows them loves them. They're really sweet people. And they came here as digital nomads with the intention that after Refi Barichara, they would stay for at least a few months. Their initial thinking was 6 months. They exemplify the kinds of people that, as bioregional activators in that new realm of work we're creating, that we would want to help create the conditions for them to leave this bioregion and go and serve another bioregion, because the work they do is valuable in any context. Jill, I'd say the same about you. So this is one way that their work relates to yours. We could send you somewhere to help with what you do. And yesterday we had lunch with them where they told us what they wanted to do during the next 3 months. And they said, we've identified 3 projects. La Huerta Comunitaria, which is this community garden where there's syntropic agriculture, and about 30 families are working on food resilience. The Bioparque, which we all know about, because we talk about it so much. And another project called Agua Santa, which is a 14-hectare regenerative agriculture project that's also networked to 14 other farms, or 13 other farms, that does cooperative learning around biochar and soil building and watershed restoration, sort of like a kick-ass place, with Carlos and Maritza, who are the kind of people you can't believe how awesome they are, even as you're looking at them in front of you. They're just so cool. And so they were like, there are these 3 projects, and what they want to do is figure out how to prototype the design of a method. So in the next 3 months, they want to prototype a method that verifies that ecological healing or ecological restoration is occurring, using a set of criteria that are different things. So there's direct human observation, there's data sensors, there's drones or some kinds of aerial footage. They're looking at different ways you can gather data and trying to create a framework where a local community could set up and implement this framework. And with Sam, they want to make it very usable and engaging. With Sev, they want to be sure the data analytics is really good and the methodological design is really good. And they want to do this for all 3 projects, so that they can just monitor their own projects and learn about them, so they can engage more of the community with them, because one of the elements of this is they want to create a mobile app that could allow people to enter data, which immediately connects us to the work of one of their collaborators, a wonderful man named Jimo, who's currently living in Atlanta. I'm forgetting, he's from Mozambique, I think. He's from somewhere in Africa. Really wonderful guy. And what he does, just sort of one step removed from their work, is he creates citizen science projects for local schools to create community gardens, where they can do data tracking of micro carbon sequestration, like at the level of individual plants. So that you could then take a network of local schools and aggregate enough carbon sequestration to be able to receive carbon credits. They're working on the bridging from the grassroots local to eventually a level of aggregation where the completely broken carbon market system could actually help on the ground projects. And Sev is really passionate about exactly that problem too. So they're working on these kinds of things where the usability of, in the Bioparque, they have children from the area schools. How could Sev and Sam prototype a mobile app that would allow kids from the local school to document restoration work in a way that the kids are learning, but the data is of high enough quality that if it aggregated with other projects, we could actually bring an eco credit, like a carbon credit or some other eco credit, to the global market and bring money to the local community. or just simply celebrate anyone who wants to fund projects, donate to this one because we can verify they're doing ecological restoration. So Gail, you can see how this relates to your work in interesting ways too. These methodologies would apply. I know you already do some work like this. So you can imagine sending Sam and Seb to Honduras, for example, of ways that these digital nomads can land into an environment and prototype meaningful tools for local projects with the local projects. And so I just wanted to give you a feel for what Seb and Sam are doing in the next 3 months and how powerfully this unique expertise of the outsider, if we create the relationships the right way, the unique expertise of the outsider can profoundly transform what the local projects can do. And so that's where this regenerative finance, crypto, Web3, like, why are we talking to all these people? Well, just look at what Seb and Sam do. It's amazing. It's amazing what they do. And so, so this is the kind of blend of digital, decentralized, global, not place-based, can connect with local place-based projects and cluster them. If they do the same mobile app with 3 projects, you know what they did is they built a database where they can aggregate data from 3 projects. If you can aggregate it from 3, you can aggregate it from 300. And this is the importance of the data infrastructure, is we might get 1 ton of carbon from 50 projects in the database. But each project, how the hell would you get to 1 ton of carbon for carbon credits? Like, this is the broken part. This is one of the many broken parts of the carbon markets. And so this is the kind of thing I want to tell this story to show you how, so let me just summarize the 3 stories. The first story is the cultural underbelly, the dark shadow, the trauma shadow of something that is so hard to do, like give money to someone who agreed to receive it. In the broken nation states and our cultural histories, how deeply the trauma healing is needed for real cooperation to occur, and how powerfully cooperation can create unexpected relationships between outsiders and locals if we can just get the frameworks of cooperation right. And so this is all happening right now in Barichara. And we need the world to know about this. We need this kind of learning happening everywhere on Earth. And then we need to do things like find the funding to send Sam and Seb to their next place. I already seeded the idea that we need to do this for Jill because of what she does with Holochain and with other projects she works with. But like, most of us have no idea how to bring what we have to offer into these very complex local environments. Seb and Sam could not have landed here without the Mapathon that happened, without the refi event, creating a container and a set of experiences, and then for them to be chaperoned through Margarita and her relationships, the people they met during the event. And they didn't ask me to create this project for them. They didn't ask my approval. They just told us what their plan was, and we're like, sweet, do it. Do you need Carlos's contact to talk to him because he's at Agua Santa? Like, we were just like, how can we help you talk directly to the people who will tell you how to help their project? And so I want to stop there and just say these were the 3 stories I wanted to tell, to just give you a feel for like the richness of this learning, how confusing this learning is. Like, I think we can all feel that there's a lot to do with it, but we also may not know what to do with it, because it will only know what to do within a very specific context. Within our context, we know exactly what to do with it. And so, like, I would ask, Gail to be thinking about one of the projects she works in, rather than what could One Earth Conservation do with this is too big. Like, look at Honduras, look at Nicaragua. I don't know, pick one. Like, what would you do in one of them? Who would it be with? Where's the conversation? And
Oh yeah, I'm already thinking of that, but it's complicated, and I need Laura Kim on board. I cannot do it without her because she's the interface with all the projects. But Honduras would be the obvious one. But if they don't want to, or if it's too hard, we do have other possibilities. So I'm definitely thinking about it. Yeah.
Yeah, and just to name other people who I know are doing interesting things. Claire, how does this relate to the complex socio-political environment of your life, and how much you care for the old growth forest that's being destroyed where you live? You know, like all the tribes that are there. How does this relate? It's like you can see how without a specific context, there'd be no way to know. But I'm sure you have lots of ideas of, like, how could you work with Brandy and our eco-village? Or is there a particular tribal community, or is there a particular activist group protecting a particular grove of trees? I don't know, like, but you will know where that goes, right? And I'm thinking of, like, with John. Yeah. Claire, go ahead.
Can I just bring something in, because it was occurring to me as you were speaking about Seven Sam and what they're doing. And at the Eco Village right now, there's a couple who've moved in for sort of a sabbatical, and he is an economist, and he just kind of landed a job, sort of the top economic job in the BC government, doing like carbon credit stuff. And it was because he said he's kind of surprised he even got the job, because he was the most qualified person doing that. But I had, from the conversations we've been having, I was actually sort of thinking, wow, it'd be so fantastic if he was to do some side projects while he's at the Eco Village, connected to all of the stuff that's going on. Kind of if he was talking to Seven Sam about what they're doing, because he would then be prototyping and being able to bring that into his position. And they're obviously, from everything he was talking about, sort of scrambling to get on board with that, and then take it in a different direction, because it just sounds so way to go, the whole way that, you know, the job is going. And so I know he's wanting to push into that. Anyway, those were things that were coming up, was harnessing what is happening there. And
yeah, well, just to close that, thank you for that, because that's so specific. It's so specific. And I'll pass to Midi in a second. I just want to say the confusing thing is the other person you should talk to is also named Sam. But instead of Samantha, who's a woman, it's Sam the man, Sam Bennett, who helps set up the research frameworks for carbon sequestration related to Regen Network. And he was also at the Refi Barichara event. And he is profoundly skeptical of carbon markets as an expert in how to set up the scientific monitoring. It's sort of like, you know, as a scientist, the more you know about the method, the more you know how much bullshit is in the greenwashing of the method. And so just to say, if it's helpful, the three people I would connect you with for that specific relationship would be Seven Sam and Sam. I'm sure there are more, but they'd be great people to start. Midi, on to you.
I think we've seen those two Sam and Sams together in the beer parquet, haven't we, in a photo once? I have a feeling we did. This may be an off-the-wall idea, but I just wonder whether it would be useful for Earth Regenerators governance group to have a conversation with Seven Sam about measurement of value of ER projects that get funded, because it's a piece that we haven't even really begun to explore. And I just wonder whether there's at some point, a dialogue needs to begin around how do we actually measure the value of what it is we're funding. So that's off the wall idea.
I nominate Jill for that.
She's quietly sitting there and smiling, but that's actually what she does.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Fantastic, Jill. I'm going to be in touch with you. I already was, because I love your website. So I was already going to connect.
Yeah, I've been celebrating Seven Sam because of the concrete of their project. Jill's taking more of the permaculture approach of observing and listening and to feel into it, but she's doing very related work. Jill, did you want to say anything about this, or am I putting you on the spot? No pressure.
I mean, I could just say, yeah, I'll say a little bit about both like people I've been working with and like the approach that I'm taking. And yeah, thank you for saying that. Yeah, I'm definitely like just trying to listen to people and try and understand where everything that I've been working on actually fits in and how it can actually fit in. Because I don't know, I take the approach that, you know, you have to meet people where they are. You have to know, you know, what level of technology and knowledge do people have, and how do you work with that? And so that's basically, you know, where I'm starting at. In terms of like the stuff that I've been working on, I've been working with this, I'd say it's a data schema called value flows. And basically takes the economic model of accounting and sort of turns it on its head. So you can account for everything, including every possible externality. And really, you could even start modeling physical systems with it, because at a deeper level, it's equivalent to a Petri net, which can be used to model chemistry processes and all sorts of things. But that's probably going too deep into that right now. So there's just a lot of things that can be represented with it. And that also makes it incredibly difficult to talk about and give concrete examples. So yeah, that's the thing that I'm struggling with right now. But I'd be very, very happy to sit down and talk about all of these things and how we can make something that actually tracks all of that value.
Yeah, one thing you're making me think of is trying to talk about cellular automata, which is basically a way of coding relationships in space and time. So it's profoundly general. It's actually, as Stephen Wolfram showed, you can simulate and reproduce. You can basically compute all of the physical laws of the universe with cellular automata. It's that general. And so it's sort of like, what the hell is that? You talk about it, but then when you see it visualized, it's a way of having local relationships between parts of something show how something evolves, which means cellular automata, automata, like M-A-T-A, automata, yeah, exactly. And cellular automata, just like do a Google search. If you want, you can look for, is it Tim Conway? What's his name that created the Game of Life? Whatever is
John Conway.
John Conway, yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
You can look up the Game of Life in cellular automata, where he showed that you could simulate biomimicry patterns using these computer programs. And the game, and so anyway, it's just one of those things where it's like, if someone says what cellular automata is, you're like, I have no clue what you're talking about. But if we sit down together and program one and watch it play out, you're like, wow, this is cool and this is so powerful. It's like that.
Yeah. Yeah, and I guess I could also recommend A New Kind of Science by Stephen Wolfram, because that's a huge book that goes through a whole bunch of stuff, but it's also very technical. So
yeah, and he's also a total narcissist and takes way too much credit.
oh, there's Melanie Mitchell. Melanie Mitchell, who's up in Portland. She's a professor, I forget which college, I think PSU. And she's written some books that are more accessible on cellular automata and complexity.
And she works with the Santa Fe Institute, right?
Yes, she does. Yeah.
Yeah, we're getting closer to Stan's world now. What I'd love to do is, I see that Eugenio has joined us today, and most of you have never met him. Eugenio, are you there? Could you come on screen and say hello? Don't want to put you on this. Well, I do want to just oh, you're at work. Okay, no worries. It's really great that Eugenio has joined us and just dropped in, because he's someone I've known from a few years ago working on platform cooperatives and collaborative systems design, but is also trying to build a really beautiful project in the Azores. Yeah, I just dropped a link into the chat. And I wanted to name Eugenio mainly because it's the first time he's joined us. And he's a good friend who I know in the background. I have lots of friends that don't come up because there are too many people. But I wanted to welcome you, Eugenio, just to say hello and say that what we're trying to do in one sense with the work in Barichara is enable relationships to emerge, like what Eugenio just shared in the chat. If you go and look at that project, you'll be like, this looks beautiful, this looks awesome, but I don't know enough about it, to know like how to do it. They're trying to create a regenerative hub on an island, like what, like that's complex. And so the richness and the detail of what we talk about here in Barichara enables us to imagine how big of an undertaking it would be to do what Eugenio just dropped into the chat. And I think the humility that comes with that, the humility of looking and going, damn, this is going to be hard, actually helps us prepare to begin to know what we're really getting ourselves into. And so, so I want to just name this piece of, as we're starting to bring more possibilities into the fold. Like Ricardo was on a call with us yesterday, and Ricardo could introduce himself if you'd like, Ricardo. Who's from Colombia, lives in Venezuela, has family that owns land very close to us in Barichara, in a nearby village called Mogotes, and we're creating bioregional scale relationships. And Mila, our dear friend for all of us here, is friends with Ricardo too, and there are a number of connections in the field. Ricardo, I'd just love to invite you to say hi, if you like, and share anything you'd like.
Thank you, Joe, and hello to everyone in this call, in this community. Some of you I just met yesterday, some in the Refi Barichara. I'm really grateful and taking part in this community, learning so much. I've been trying to watch the previous recordings on the Barichara updates, and yeah, trying to get tuned with the work because I'm really getting serious about developing that regenerative work in the place I live. That was my intention when I went to Barichara, but somehow Mogotes just was on the way. So there's a prior scale in the work I was envisioned, but I'm very happy that can, that it's evolving in a certain way. For me, it's beautifully surprising what is happening with Barichara and their regenerative work. So thanks.
Bienvenido.
Yeah.
Bienvenido, hermano. Qué bueno que estás aquí.
Thank you.
One thing that happened last week was Ricardo invited us with our friends Carlos and Maritza to visit his family's home, where his family's owned this land for something like 100 years, and there's a very complex history. His uncle is living in the house now and is an anthropologist who actually wrote a book about the history of Mogotes, which I haven't had the chance to read yet. And what's amazing is they're only maybe 50 kilometers away, like, 30 miles or something. But you go to San Hill and then you cross a mountain, and going from this dry landscape in Barichara to like every kilometer, there's another waterfall crossing the road, and there are meandering rivers through the valley. There's like so much water there, and it just shows you how complex the climate system is, because they're in the same sequence. There's that set of 3 mountain ranges that makes a triangle. They're inside it. They're part of the same climate system. They're so close to us, and yet their landscape is so different. And this is a lesson about Colombia for those of you who have never been here. You go like 10 kilometers and it's a different ecotype. Like, it's so damn diverse. It's mind-boggling how diverse Colombia is. And so here we are 50 kilometers away. It's part of the same larger climate system, but it's a different climatic type, which is an ironic thing to say. It's much wetter there, but it's wetter there while being connected to a larger atmospheric mixing process at the landscape scale. So they're part of the same bioregion. And that's what's interesting is like, is it part of the same bioregion? You know, these are going to be really interesting questions. And so going there and seeing that their land was a great place to do a syntropic agriculture workshop and set up another bioparque, another community reforestation space. It was just an immediate possibility we talked about when we visited there last week. And so this way of thinking is what I wanted to name about Ricardo being here representing Colombian culture and history, but also Venezuela, because he's in both places, and how powerful it is, the bioregional way of thinking. The bioregional lens is what brought us to Mogotes. We're like, oh, I took a picture of a map and said, this is the climate system. He's like, Mogotes is inside of that. We can collaborate, right? Ricardo, that's your feeling. And like the bioregion selected us to be friends. And so just naming how profound, how you can see the smile on Ricardo's face, like how the bioregional lens made us deeper friends, like is automatically. And so showing the power of that is really, really something significant. I don't know what else to say for today, except to just open up and say, are there any comments or questions people have before we close? I'm happy to make some space for it.
I'm just really glad to have these on the ground stories as teaching principles, Joe, that you're beginning to pull out and share. It's really invaluable.
Is there anything you want to share?
No, I think that's good.
No, I mean, what I feel is that we're at a nice place to just stop and take a walk and reflect on what does it mean that even though I've barely done anything in my own bioregion in the last week, like I went to the Bioparque twice and I spent a lot of time with Elise and doing all these online calls, and yet these 3 stories, Steph and Sam creating their own project, independent of us, they just told us about it. That I am holding the complexity of this legal thing with money in Las Albercas, which I kind of wish I wasn't, but oh well, here I am. And just naming that the healing processes for cooperation are deep. They're really deep. Benji, please.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. I just really briefly want to take the opportunity to once again promote the Regenerative Communities Network Summit that's starting next week. It's going to run 2 weeks. Looking at the calendar this morning, it looks like there's going to be a lot of really great examples and interactions of bioregions relating and bioregional work on the ground. So we'll be able to get into some real world stuff, see some real world examples. So we're going to talk, I was going to bring this conversation into the exploratory session tomorrow in the bioregional catalyst and see if there's some events that we can all attend together. So just that's all I had.
Yeah, and I'm going to grab a link for you right now, Pam, because I wrote an article this morning on Earth Regenerators that you might not have seen yet, but it'll take you to it.
Are those sessions going to be recorded and available?
Yes, but there are like 150 or 200 sessions. Like, it's huge what they're doing.
Well, that's why I'm asking, because I'm not going to be able to attend them all, but if they're available afterwards, I can pick and choose later.
Yeah, it's really something special, and it's part of the work I was doing back in 2019. I'm just finding my way back into helping them weave again. And so it's really special to be in this place of creating harmonies where there were fractures in a parallel way to the story of my friend that I mentioned here. I've been waiting for the opportunity to collaborate with other people that I couldn't collaborate with because of problems that emerged with a couple of narcissists during the time I was working with Regenerative Communities Network. I'm now able to come back into harmony with the larger field. And I want to maybe close by saying that this work with the Barichara updates, I think you can, all of you who keep coming back to these, you can really feel how powerful this learning is for those of us who come to these weekly calls. So the question I have for you to think about is, how do we replicate this depth of learning in more places. Because I don't want to just say, let's get 200 people to my Barichara updates, you know. That also would sort of erode some of the signal, you know, the signal to noise ratio of these conversations. But what we're trying to do, what we're modeling as ways of learning, I think we really need to create sustained ways of doing this. And I just happened to drop in on Jan Inglis talking about the, you know, in Bioregional Catalyst yesterday's, the Kootenays, and which is a place I bike toured through in 2014. So I know those mountains, and holy shit, they're in the Canadian Rockies, and it's just a gorgeous, special place. And like what you all are doing in Bioregional Catalyst is profoundly related to what we're doing here, but in ways that only those of us in both spaces can understand. Like I see Claire smiling, like we can sense that this is something that we need to help others learn to do. So I just want to ask each of you to feel into, how do we replicate this way of learning into other spaces? Because I feel it's transformational. And I know I have a way I do things that people can say may be special, but that would hide the truth that what is happening here is very, very much replicable. That what we're doing can be shared in so many different ways. And I just want to invite each of you to think about that, to cross cultural boundaries, language boundaries, landscape boundaries. How do we promote this way of learning? So I just wanted to invite that as like a takeaway homework assignment to think about, because the sheer complexity of any given landscape is overwhelming. Like I only give you tiny slivers of what I know about what's happening in Barichara, which is nothing compared to the reality. The reality is beyond human comprehension, and that will be true in every landscape. But these ways of learning are human, can be replicated, and we need them to be. So with that, thank you all for being here. I will publish the recording and share it. I have been putting all of the recordings in 2 places up until now. I put them under the Barichara Updates event in Earth Regenerators, and also where I have the regenerated entire territory, I put it in the appendix. So I've just been holding them there and adding new ones. But what I'm about to do in Bioregional Activators, which is a space that is a new space for this kind of work, I'm going to create a standing page that I can just hold it. But I want us to think about, you know, going back and watching 17 1-hour or longer recordings is too much to ask of anyone. But archiving this is going to be really important. More important is creating pedagogical designs from it. So Claire, was there something that you wanted to share related to this or anything?
Yeah, I just wanted to bring up something that's, and it might just be that I can't do the mental flips, but I'm used to working with organizations and governance systems, and what I've noticed is that certainly in British Columbia, but I think it looks like it's happening everywhere, there's just been no investment in, especially the grassroots groups, in governance support. And you've got people in extreme dysfunction, like fairly consistently all over the place. And so it breaks down any ability to really properly work together, because you start doing some stuff and there's no investment in that. And there used to be more support, there's less and less now. And so what I found very difficult, and it just seems to be that the sand in the gears all the time, is as one person coming in and trying to kind of educate or trying to kind of help create some of that infrastructure or knowledge, it's really, really difficult. So from an organizational perspective, I've got more traditional training, but I've tried to sort of figure out ways of asking questions that can, because really, how do we create functional systems like those pro-social systems, or like bringing pro-social in? But anyway, I just wanted to name that, and just to say that's still a huge question in my mind for the kind of support that I could feel.
Yeah.
Really.
One thing I can say in response to that is, as Benji has been holding dialogue around with the idea of the core team or the idea of a landscape partnership in the common land model. When I think about creating a landscape activation fund, where like, I'm starting to tell people I want to be able to bring $500,000 to each bioregion that is ready to receive the money because it's already received enough support to figure out how to create a landscape partnership, whatever they call themselves locally, but these are just concepts I'm using, that you can imagine what it would mean to have a group of people that are weaving the territory, to be able to receive the support for 2 or 3 years to weave the territory further. I know you of all people know how powerful that is, because all of your work as a community artist is that kind of work. That this is what I think of once, because someone says $500,000 will go away so quickly at the landscape level, it's tiny. And I'm like, yeah, but if it can sustain the evolution of these landscape partnerships for 1, 2, 3, 4 years, because it'll vary from, in Colombia, $500,000 goes a lot farther than British Columbia. But either way, to sustain it for a couple of years of convening, of hosting, of mapping, of all these conversations, this is absolutely transformational. And as I'm looking for funding for this, as I'm holding the spaces of collaborative funding around this, which Penny and I are going to be holding, we just want to be hosts of this space until it can host itself. We're going to be hosting things like, what would it mean for an activation fund to be gathered while cultivating the ability for a landscape to receive an activation fund? And this is where I think we're starting to see where bioregional catalysts and bioregional activators, these things, they're starting to become something that makes more sense as a system for those of us who know what that is. I know I'm tagging words that some people don't know what we mean by that, but Benji's smiling, he gets it. As long as Benji gets it, we're good for now, because we're going to communicate all this as we figure it out. Benji, you and I are going to build the communication pathways with everyone else, so we're good. Everyone will be, we'll pull in all the volunteers.
Sounds good. And we'll swim through the froth together on the way.
Yeah. As long as the froth includes lattes, I'm good.
It can.
So I just wanted to honor what you said, Claire, that it's exactly that acupuncture point that we want to target with collaborative funding. Exactly that place. Enough money for local projects to continue while the weavers of those projects continue at the same time. That is what the core team and the regenerative projects look like in that visual graphic of the landscape fund of common land. That's what that is. And so it's exactly this. And if we can do this, if we can show what it means to be organized enough to receive funds, and if we can show what it means to generate these funds, whether it's through Gitcoin funding rounds or Giveth and what they do, these weird crypto tools that do some of it, whether it's just donations through Vivero. By the way, we're talking with Todd Youngblood about this. Like, these are the kinds of things we want to be thinking about and practicing, putting it into practice and learning how to do this. So thank you so much for bringing that up. Yes, Benji.
If I could just really briefly tag onto that. So maybe this is an opportunity for me to commit to this in front of everybody, but the next webinar that I think I'll host will be this topic, because I really need to figure out how to fund myself. I'm getting down to the end of what I have available, my own personal resources. And so I'm considering, granted, I'm in the virtual space in the bioregional catalyst, but I think that we can sort of draw some parallels to a wider process that we're trying to cultivate that will take a lot of time, that is directly parallel to forming core teams and landscape partnerships and the processes that they're meant to hold. So maybe we can, if anybody wants to talk about that, I'm probably going to do something in 2 weeks, and it'll be just the beginning of an ongoing conversation. And how can I model my own process of funding as a way to build scaffolding and mechanisms for us to extend this to other bioregional weavers and catalysts and whatever you want to call them.
We got you, Benji. High fives. Mehdi, please.
I just want to say, Benji, you are our prototype ER fellow. And whatever you come up with is our prototype for the fellowship to go forward. And it's really, really crucial. It's absolutely at the core of how we shift the individual in ER initial support into the ongoing support of bioregional activation. So I'm there with you. You know, I have no idea how to do it, but I'm there with you because I know it's utterly core to what we're about.
Well, maybe you can help me initially by letting me know who to invite into the conversation.
Will do.
See you there, Penny.
Yeah, so for now, I just want to close by saying that part of what we're going to be doing in the coming weeks, and we, I mean, we here, is holding the space for coherence of this complexity. And we'll mess up, I'm sure, but we're doing our best. And I feel like we will be at a place a few weeks from now where much more of this is more clear. Because we're holding, when I say we're holding the space, means we are harvesting what so many of you are doing through various indirect channels. So there's going to be an incredible wisdom and intelligence that might be wrongfully attributed to us. That is actually what we're gathering from you, because this is how it really works. But we hold responsibility for this piece of it, because we know that what usually doesn't happen is the hosting of inspiring dialogue to sustained collaboration. That is usually not held.
Mhm.
And we know how important it is to figure this out for a lot of people. So with that said, I think we'll stop before we jump into another round, because I think all of our noodles are sizzling. We're all like at this point. And just say thank you, everyone. Reach out to anyone here at any time about anything that came up. I hope that Mitty and Jill have a conversation soon, and anyone else who wants to. You will enjoy getting to know her better, as we have. And then onward we go, because it's only going to get more complex and more messy in the future. That's guaranteed. So thank you, everyone, for your attention, for your hearts, for your contributions. And onward we go. Thank you.
Thanks.